Rock and metal invasion. Rock and metal invasion. Rock and metal invasion. Rock and metal invasion.
Hi, welcome to Rock and Metal Invasion. My name is Steve. Coming up on the show today, I am doing how to fund a record collection, tips for buying vinyl. So this is a little bit different to the type of show I usually do, but I thought it might be interesting and you might appreciate maybe some ideas that I have that you might find interesting and might find will help you if you are looking to increase your record collection. So I'm going to talk about some things that I've done that have helped me accumulate the records that I have in my collection now. So just some little tips and tricks that I've found have worked for me. So let's get into it. The best thing to do if you want to get a good record collection and you want to do it for a good price, get in a time machine, go back 20 years and buy up all the secondhand rock and metal records you can find. It's that simple. All right, hope you enjoyed the show. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, basically, if you could do that, that would be the way you could very easily and at a great price gain a fantastic collection, especially if looking for rock and metal vinyl. That's the way to do it, because 20 years ago, 15 years ago, you could pick up secondhand records at a great price. Now, I know this because that's basically 15 years ago was when I got back into collecting records again. Well, I was always a music collector, always had music, had lots of CDs, but yeah, like I say, about 15 years ago, I decided I'm going to just start buying a few records, especially those records that I really love. Initially, I was only going to buy my absolute essential albums that I remember having back in the 80s that I thought, oh, they're fantastic records. I got fantastic albums. I want to get those on vinyl. So I was just going to get a few, just those really essential ones. And we all sort of know what happened. And I think one of the reasons that actually happened was 15 years ago when I started doing it, they weren't expensive. So yeah, I went off and I bought Dio and I bought Bon Jovi and I bought Dokken, just those artists and those albums that I really loved. But then I remember I went into a music shop. This is a fairly local music shop. And, this is before vinyl had got popular again, really. A few people maybe buying vinyl. Obviously, the record shop was still selling vinyl, but they weren't selling it for very much. And they had a whole lot of secondhand records that they just decided, let's just put them all at $2. So they were all $2. So I went in there and I was finding for $2 House of Lords, Kicks, Great White, not your top, real well-known, super well-known hard rock bands or metal bands, but those kind of still fairly popular. But yeah, on record 15 years ago, they weren't really that valuable. So they were all like $2. So I ended up buying about 50 of them, right? So I went back home and all of a sudden my record collection, and I only spent like $100, got the 50 records. All of a sudden my record collection that was only supposed to be just those essential albums was starting to get quite big. And then once that started, it just sort of carried on from there. So yeah, obviously, we can't go back 15, 20 years. So that can't happen. But I just wanted, I guess, to highlight the fact that, yeah, that really helped me. When I started, it was a lot cheaper to buy records. But that's not the reality now. So what can you do now if you want to increase your record collection? Okay, my first tip, if you want to increase your record collection, you need to sell records. Now, I know that might sound weird, like I want more records and you're telling me to sell records. But here's the thing. You've always got to be on the lookout for good deals. And actually, not just selling records, maybe even selling CDs as well. You might have some CDs in your collection that you no longer play, or maybe you're just not into CDs anymore. Sell those and they will help fund your record collection. Likewise, you might have some records in your collection that you don't play or that you just really don't like. Sell them if you can, if they're sellable, of course. Sell them to fund the records you do want. But that's okay. I mean, you've got those in your collection. That's a no-brainer. But I'm also saying, and this is how I felt, this is what I've done to fund my collection, is I've purchased records and CDs just with the sole aim of selling them. So I'm buying them not to keep in my collection, but to sell them because I've found them at a great price. And I guess it's just something you work out over time, that what that person is selling that record for or that CD for is not its value. It could be actually sold for a lot more. And, you know, how I've sold it is usually on auction sites and different various auction sites. But usually, if I see something at a good price that I know I can sell for more, then that's what happens. And then I'm able to use that money that I've made to buy more records. So it's kind of one of those situations where you've got to be a little bit knowledgeable about what sells and what doesn't. I'm still really only buying hard rock or heavy metal, so it's not like I'll find a pop artist. There are occasions when I do, or you know, some other genre, because I'm not knowledgeable about that either. So that's another thing. So I'm not knowledgeable about how valuable that is, but I might see a hard rock or metal album that I think would sell for more, that I could then sell, and that helps fund other records I want. Now, it might even be a record I already have in my collection, so I'm still going to buy it, Dave, and I've got it because I know that it can be sold for more money. It's difficult these days for that to happen because people are now understanding the value of vinyl. They use resources like Discogs to look at what the value of the records are, and then sometimes that's even inflating it even more. But certainly, you know, when I was starting out my collection, that was how I was funding a lot of my collection, and it was also actually kind of fun, you know. So there's a auction site here in New Zealand that I use called Trade Me. So I'll put on CDs on there, records on there, and yeah, as I say, I don't always sell everything either, but often if I'm only buying hard rock or heavy metal records or CDs, it's often okay, didn't sell, I'm happy to keep it then. But it's kind of that stuff I'm either happy to sell if it sells great, or that I know I've already got, it's a double up, but it's fine, I'm still going to be able to sell that for a good price. So yeah, I've picked up things in the past that I've happened to find. Like I say, you got to go looking, and you can find things online, but that's getting harder. You can find things out in the wild, different places, of course. You know, and I'll talk about sort of out in the wild kind of stuff later in the show about how you can find good deals there. But yeah, so however I find these records or CDs, yeah, find a good deal and then sell it, and that will help fund the records that you want. And don't restrict yourself just to records, because some people really want CDs. And yes, you're probably not going to make quite so much money on the CDs, but it adds up over time, I find. Even if I'm just making $3 or $4 off a CD, right, that adds up over time and helps fund a record or records that I want. Right, next thing I want to talk about is Discogs. Now, obviously, if you're starting a record collection, I say obviously, but it's obvious to me, Discogs is a great resource. No doubt about it. Even 15 years ago, when I was just starting out to buying records, I was buying a lot of records on Discogs. And yeah, it was great then because, like I said before, you could buy records at a pretty good price and wasn't costing a lot to get these records that now sell for a lot more. But there are some still things you can do that will help you be successful in Discogs. And here's some little things that I do that I find work quite well. Now, there's an option to filter your search. So, and I even have this bookmarked as well. So I'm not always having to set up my filter. I just have it bookmarked. And my filter is set to certain things that I find are effective search criteria. because certain things I find work really well. Now, obviously, I'm looking for hard rock and heavy metal, so it's always filtered to hard rock or heavy metal records. But the other thing I look at is location. So it's good to know where records that you are wanting can be found more easily and also at a good price. And also where, especially for me being here in New Zealand, where the shipping is not so expensive. So for me, the places I find are really good are Denmark and Germany. Now, it could be different for you for where you are, especially as I say, I'm in New Zealand, so it's got to go a fair amount away. So shipping's never cheap. But for those countries, I find if you buy in bulk, especially, the shipping's not so bad. Now, when you do buy something from Discogs, or you find something you like on Discogs, you don't even have to necessarily buy it straight away, but you can still put it in your cart. So that's what I tend to do. I might buy that. I'll put it in my cart, but it just sits there, and then I might see something else from that seller, and I add it to my cart, and then eventually once I've got a good number of things, then I might decide to actually buy those records from that seller. And quite often I'm buying maybe 5 or 6 at a time, sort of thing, because that's going to make the shipping more worthwhile. I don't find America particularly good to buy records from because, again, the shipping's expensive, and often they don't even necessarily have the records I want, and if they do, they're at I find a higher price. Now, it's changed a little bit, I will say, as I said, I find Denmark really good, but it's not as good as it used to be. Germany also good, and sometimes the UK is good especially for 12-inch singles, because they have, again, you've got to think about where these records originated. So a lot of 12-inch singles, so I'm just looking at hard rock, heavy metal, 12-inch singles or maxi singles. They came out mainly just in the UK, but some in Europe as well. So that's a good place to go for those. Shipping's a little pricey, but I still do look there. Also, what I do is I look at the seller, and then I look to see if they've got their own website. So, because if you buy from Discogs, there's going to be a success fee for the seller. So they're actually going to end up having to charge more to sell you their products on Discogs than they sell their products on their own website. So just check that the seller doesn't actually have their own website where they are also selling their records. So for example, for me, a couple of good sellers on Discogs, Myon and RecordSale-de. It's a German site. They sell a lot of records. Both those sites sell a lot of records, and they sell a lot of records on Discogs. So often we'll go to Discogs to look at what they've got, but then we'll go to their actual website to buy the records because they're cheaper on their own website. And sometimes they might even have deals as well. So now, not every seller, of course, on Discogs is like that. Some it's just private sellers. They don't have their own website. You have to buy through them. But I just sometimes find that's worth checking out, because often you will get a better deal if you go through their own website. One more thing, just with, I guess, grading. So when you you might look up an album and the artist, say, for example, I don't know, Motley Crue, Shout at the Devil. You want to buy that record, so you look it up. What I tend to do is I will order it by price. So I might look at what's the cheapest copy of Motley Crue, Shout at the Devil. Now, just because it's the cheapest, though, you do then have to consider the grading, and of course, you have to consider the shipping, right? So it's cheap, but then it's going to cost me $50 to get sent to me. So it's not worth it. But the grading is also worth considering, because, and I'm sure a lot of you already know this, but good is not good. So if it's got a grading of good, it's a bit rough. Okay, so poor obviously is what it says, almost possibly unusable. So they have the grading for the cover and they have a grading for the media, so for the actual record itself. For me, I'm definitely more fussy about the media because I want to be able to play it. I want it to sound reasonable. The cover, I'm less concerned about. But obviously, if I'm thinking about reselling it, I find a cover, if it looks bad, it's hard to sell because people just visually just see that, and that's less appealing. I find if it's VG+, there's nothing to worry about. VG+ or Mint, it doesn't really make that much difference to me. Obviously, mint is slightly better, but I don't care. For me, I'm having records in my collection. VG Plus I find is always really very good. VG also is fine. I'm not super fussy, and I find it's playable and looks acceptable. But yeah, when you go down to G or G Plus, even it's a G Plus. You know, sometimes I've got G Plus and it's been like I'm expecting it not to be good, and it's not. Sometimes I've got G Plus and it's like that's actually not that bad. So that can be worth a gamble, especially if you're getting it for a good price. But like I say, VG or definitely VG Plus, there's not going to be any issue with the cover or the vinyl if it is graded with that. And my next tip, probably a bit of a no-brainer really, but just if you can, buy it locally. So then you cut out your shipping costs. But I mean, again, that's not always possible for people. You may not have a record shop in your area. I don't particularly have one real close by, but I can get to one. But you know, a bit of a trip, but I can get there and I can have a look. But often I find there's limited selections, and you know, pricing's not necessarily great. I do, however, find that when there's a record fair, so sometimes there's record fairs in my area, and I do find that they can be worthwhile. And when I go to a record fair, here's another little tip. This is what I do anyway, is I tend to kind of scope the area a little bit beforehand. So I'll look around at the sellers, and you can usually tell, oh, I've seen that guy before, And so they're always at record fairs, and there's nothing wrong with that, of course. And sometimes they can have great records, but I'm actually really looking for that more casual person who's got a whole lot of records and they've seen the record fairs coming up and they're like, I might as well just get rid of these records. I don't really play them much, because they are more likely maybe to sell their records at a, not always, but more likely maybe to have it at a really good price. And also those records that maybe you just don't see that much, especially if they've got a very specific collection. So they might, you know, and this hardly ever happens, but they might have a massive hair metal collection that they decided to get rid of. Well, I mean, hello, I'm going to be there, and you just, you know, I'm just going to be like going to town on that if that was the case. So that's what I kind of tend to do, is look around there. And even if you just go to each seller and just look through a few records in each crate, you kind of get a bit of a feel for, that guy's a bit expensive. This person's average, fair price. Oh, wow, this person's got some good deals here. So I might sort of focus on that, because I also find when I go to record fairs, at the start especially, they're quite jammed. You got to kind of pick and choose where you can get into. And yeah, if you can find a good seller with good records, focus on that, because that's what I often find. I go to a record fair and it will just be one, maybe two sellers that I buy everything from, because they've got good records that I'm looking for and at a good price. So yeah, that's, I think for me, out in the wild now, these days, it's mainly record fairs. But don't discount your local record shops, or even actually what I do as well is record shops, not even just locally, but in my own country, is look up their websites, because often they'll have records listed. And I'm usually, what I do is I'll go to their website and just look at their new arrivals. So there's a couple like record shops here in New Zealand. One's Real Groovy. They get a lot of records in each day. So I always look at their new arrivals. Sometimes they'll have some good, you know, they'll have some records I'm looking for. They'll be at a fair price. I'm not going to get a bargain deal or anything, but the quality will be good. The grading's always accurate. And, you know, sometimes you get lucky and get a good deal. There's Vinyl Countdown as well. That's another website here in New Zealand. It's a record shop, but it's not local. I can't get to it easily. So these are shops I can't get to, but they're in my country. So the shipping's good and they will ship to me. So yeah, so, and there's other ones as well. There's even other smaller, slightly ones, or I've joined mailing lists. So there's guys who just sell records, you know, maybe just sort of a little bit like I do, you know, just records that they've got in their collection they want to get rid of. They have a mailing list or things like that. So I get on the mailing list, even for some of the bigger record shops, get on the mailing list, because sometimes they'll have deals, you know, we have 10% off or record store day deals or something like that. You can't get to record store day, but they're going to have online deals. So get to know your sort of record shops in your area. If they've got websites, yeah, again, it's just like a bit like I was saying with the Discogs. If a record shop's got their own website, you'll find it'll be a better deal than it will be somewhere else. So because they don't have to pay any success fees. So yeah, so I do that a little bit as well. But talking of online sites outside of Discogs, I have used eBay from time to time, but I actually find that as far as things coming up for auction, that they are quite expensive sometimes. And again, it's just because people have become more knowledgeable, and also there's more demand for certain records. So you can end up paying quite a bit of money. And also for me, the shipping can be quite expensive as well. I have used eBay to sell things, and if you've got something particularly rare, that can be a good place to sell things. But also, I've also found their success fees are quite high, and you end up paying quite a lot in success fees. I do sometimes buy new records actually on eBay, because there's a couple of sellers on there, quite big sellers like Rare Waves or Collector's Choice, that I find the price pretty good and the shipping's cheap as well. So I use them sometimes for new records. But yeah, I mean, that's really a whole nother subject in itself too. New records, because new records have just got so expensive. So if you're looking to increase your record collection, buying new records, well, it's going to cost you quite a bit of money. And, it's going to take you, unless you've just got unlimited funds, it's going to take you quite a bit of time to really get a big collection, because you could be paying, like here in New Zealand, potentially new records, $80 to $100 these days. It might be a double LP, it might have all this, fancy packaging, but at the end of the day, it's just an album, So for me, it's got almost, a little too expensive. And I've always sort of enjoyed the secondhand records more, especially with my records or my type of music that I'm into and now collecting. It's that 80s and 90s hard rock, heavy metal, hair metal, whatever you want to call it, albums. So yeah, I do actually buy new albums. There's new artists I like as well, but I've stopped sort of buying those now because, as I say, the price has kind of just got a little bit crazy. But yeah, I mean, like I say, there's a couple of sellers on eBay that aren't too bad. There's a record shop here in New Zealand, only sells new records, but every sort of long weekend, so I want to say long weekend, a holiday weekend, they'll have a 20% off sale. So it's JB Hi-Fi. It's an Australian company, I think. It's just very predictable. There's a long weekend coming up, holiday weekend. They usually always take 20% off all their CDs and vinyl. So if there's a new release that's come out, like as I say, it's probably being sold for $70, $80. Take 20% off. If it's one I really want, then I might think it's worth it. But again, it's still not cheap, So again, if you're looking to increase your record collection and you just looking to buy new, it is going to cost you. Now, one other thing you can do though, if you're going to buy new records, is don't buy it as soon as it comes out. Okay, I know that some people suffer from FOMO, that fear of missing out. But if you're patient and you're willing to wait, you might find the price goes down. So I've done that sometimes, and it's like, initially the price was $80 on it, and then it goes down to $50 or $40, and it seems a lot more of a reasonable sort of a price. So if you're happy to wait, you can also get it at a cheaper price. Yeah, you might miss out. From time to time, they do sell out, but I find for the most part, if you wait, you can actually get it at a cheaper price. All right, and last one I'm going to talk about, which I'm not going to talk about for long because there's not really much to say, is like charity shops or op shops. I do check those out from time to time, but that has had diminishing returns for me over in the last sort of few years. I used to find, 10, 15 years ago sort of thing, when I was, looking to increase my collection of CDs and vinyl, I could actually find some CDs at, those type of places, and at obviously a really cheap price, right? Even if it's looking for things that I can then buy and then sell. But these days, I find very little there. I'm not sure what it's like in other countries. Maybe it's worthwhile, but obviously that is definitely secondhand shops, op shops, charity shops, whatever you want to call them. They are still worth checking out, but I find for me, chances of finding anything are pretty slim. All right, so there we go. That's my sort of tips and tricks for increasing your record collection. I don't know if I've told you anything that's particularly useful, but I hope you enjoyed hearing about it. If you did and you like this type of content, make sure you hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you later.